Welcome to the REI Hacker Podcast, where we unlock the secrets of real estate success. Join us as we dive into the journeys of top investors, mentors, and industry experts. Learn from their experiences and navigate the highs and lows of the investing world. And now, let's hand it off to our host, Benson Juarez.
Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for being here with us today. I really appreciate it. I am excited. My friend Brad Chandler is with us. He is a entrepreneur. He is a real estate investor. He's the founder and CEO of Express Homebuyers and the founder of Brad Chandler Coaching. Brad, thank you so much for taking the time, man. I'm really appreciative of you coming on. How are you?
I'm amazing. Thanks for having me.
You are welcome. We've been fortunate to know each other for a few years now. We did a podcast recording probably over 5 years ago. And I feel like you were a different person then. And we're both in the same mastermind, and we get to interact from time to time. And I've seen a change in you, and you are pretty vocal about the changes in your life that have happened in the last few years. So I'm really excited to kind of learn about that journey. Mostly right now, it sounds like you do have like your main business that generates significant revenue in Express Homebuyers, which you spend very little time on, and I want to talk about that. But also your passion in Brad Chandler Coaching, which now is centered around you taking everything that you've learned through your life up to this point, and teaching it to others so that you can help them, overcome feelings of anxiety, self-doubt, bad relationships, fear of judgment, so that they can unlock their full potential. Basically, you've uncovered, I would say, like a proven process to help them overcome untruths and then achieve all the success they want in their lives. Tell me about that program and what's so special about it.
I tell you what, I haven't talked to you much about this, and I want to hire you as like a salesperson. You just like nailed it, man. That's really great. You must have listened to some old podcasts. So the process, wow, where do I start? I think I need to go back and tell my story to kind of put it in perspective. So for 47 years, I was wearing a mask and I didn't know it. I was trying to be someone who I wasn't. I was this confident, you've known me post and pre-transformation, right? So I was this confident guy, seemed to be confident, seemed to have everything together, but I didn't have everything together. And I was fortunate enough to try to get in the process of trying to get my son help for anxiety. And I was told by a performance coach that I might have a tic, not I might. She was like, you blink like crazy when you talk about your childhood, and you might have some unresolved childhood programming issues or trauma or stress that are actually affecting your son's anxiety. And I'm like, me? Like, no way. Not only is there not anything wrong with me, but if there was, I've got a great relationship with my son. Like, there's no anxiety. I can be causing that. So she's like, well, it's true. And you can come out and work with me and my husband if you'd like. And I did. And over the course of a weekend in Park City, Utah, my life forever changed. And I came back and I looked around at all the people I know in my family and networks and business and everywhere, country club, marina. And I'm like, wow, their struggle and their suffering and their shitty marriage and their overweightness and their addictions and depression and anxiety. Oh my Lord, it's all the same thing. And what is that same thing? It's very simple. When you don't have your needs met as a child, which I have met very few people who have had all of their needs met as a child. When we don't have our needs met, Benson, we come up with stories, meanings to get us through those stressful events. And those usually are negative. I don't deserve something. I'm not lovable. I'm not good enough. And it's actually really good to help us get through that stressful time. But when you're 47 years old and you're buying a 42-foot boat and you've never owned a boat and you're like, I'm going to take this to the Bahamas, and you can't even read a chart, it's a problem. It's a problem. In hindsight, I now can unearth that. But back then, I didn't wake up and say, I'm going to buy this boat and go to the Bahamas, and then people will think I'm worthy. But that's what my subconscious mind was telling me. And guess who controls all your behavior, 95% of your behavior? It's your subconscious mind. So we've got not millions, billions of people walking around on this planet that are in prison, that are terrorists, that are about to get divorced, commit suicide. They're addicts. They're overweight. They've got kids with behavioral problems. Benson, it's all from one thing and one thing only. It's flawed thinking. And that thinking was created decades ago, just trying to help yourself get through a situation. So long story, trying to make it short now, is that I was given such a profound gift and my life shifted in such a profound way that I was like, how can I not give this back? And then I started studying it and I'm like, I've never been, look at my bookshelf. It's nothing but psychology books, trauma books, the brain, the neuroscience. Like I have never found anything that I love and find more interesting in than this topic. I could literally sit here till midnight tonight and talk to you about you, your kids, your wife, your relationships, your friends, like everything to do with the brain and neuroscience, because it's so life-changing. And so I'm here to spread the message that if you're suffering and you think you've done everything, you haven't. There's a better way, and life can change in a profound way really quickly.
That's amazing. So how long ago was it that you went and saw those people in Utah?
It was February. So this February, which is coming up next month, I'll be a couple weeks away from it, will be the 3-year anniversary.
3 years. So in 3 years, you learned some new tricks, tips, some things of looking at your own life, and you applied them and you were able to fix some things, and you had some aha moments and some realizations, and you got it to a point where you're like, oh, I can take what I learned and teach others. And so you've been studying it since then, and you put together a methodology, a proven process that you've put in place. You've got dozens of people on your website, testimonials of people talking about how you've helped them. People I know, people that I think are very super successful, people who look like they're dressed perfectly, and they just ooze professionalism and they ooze confidence. And now I'm going to look at things differently, just knowing that. But it's really interesting to me that we talked about all of these people who are who can't overcome those things in their life. They go to prison, they act out, they do the bad things. But I see a lot of people who are super successful who also have these limiting beliefs. Like what makes one person go down the bad path? We'll just call it that. And then what makes it different for somebody who's highly successful, who's just unhappy?
I mean, what a great question, man. I think about this all the time. And I don't like to see things in the world as good or bad. I like to just see them for as they are, right? But my trauma, my I'm not enough, caused me to go try to prove myself. And I thought if I can make a lot of money, that's how I can prove myself. Now, there are other people in my family who took an opposite path, and it was just like, oh, I'm not going to make a lot of money. I'm going to be a victim. I'm going to be, I'm not going to earn a bunch of money. I haven't cracked that code, but I will tell you something really interesting. If you look at the IQ difference between like a Fortune 500 CEO and a mid-level manager at Walmart, I don't know what they make, say $60,000, $70,000 a year. The IQ difference is very, 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 very little. So it's just everyone's brain responds differently to trauma and stress. Some people literally, your sister could come home from the hospital and you could think your parents loved her more than you, and that could create an addiction in you. Other people, it might not affect them that much. So it's not good or bad. It's more of what level does it affect you and how does it affect you? Is it going to affect me where I go work really, really hard and try to maintain like a young looking body because I want to prove something? Or is it, I'm not worth, even though I didn't think I was worth anything, I try to prove myself. Could I have taken the path that I'm not worth anything, and so then I'm just going to go stay in a $12 an hour job? I could have done that just as easily and been like,
right,
my father made me feel like I was not good enough, so I don't deserve anything. So I'm just going to stay in this, $12 an hour job forever.
right. So there isn't any sort of like hardwiring in our brains that we can point to that says that we're going to react one way or another for two people who grew up in the exact same situation. The whole nature versus nurture discussion, right? But like you and your sister had a similar upbringing, right? The nurture was the same. The nature had to be the same because you got the same genes.
Yep.
Is there anything around that?
There is something around sensitivity. So they did a study and they were trying to find a gene with aggressiveness, and then they found it in the aggressive people. But then they're like, but wait, we also found it in the least aggressive people. Sensitivity, if you are born highly sensitive, trauma actually affects you more. So you go to, we've got the United States and the world's prisons full of these big men with tattoos and muscles that are like looking like they're badasses, and they're just little kids, hurt little kids that are super sensitive. So that is something that they have found. The sensitivity gene, you take on the impact of trauma more than someone who isn't sensitive.
Interesting. I don't want to take us on a tangent, but this popped into my mind as we were talking about it. Does that sensitivity gene affect whether or not somebody is liberal or conservative, do you think?
I would doubt it. I would
No?
totally doubt it.
Okay. So when you talk to liberal-minded people versus people who are more conservative, they are more emotionally driven. They make decisions based more off of emotion than they do rational thought processes. And I know there's some science behind that.
Wow, I never
But it
heard
sounds
that
like,
before.
yeah, and this is maybe completely separate from that, so we won't go down that tangent. So you learned some of this stuff about, we learned about some of yourself by going through this process with these fine people from Utah, and they probably did some sort of extracting of information from you by some exercises, leading you through some discussions to peel back the onion and really get to the core of what was it that makes you tick now, and who is the young child that was, I guess, who has trauma. What was that process like?
So it was a process of going back into times in my childhood where I felt like I didn't have control or I had some type of stress or trauma. And then he asked me several questions around, what was the meaning that I placed on those events? Because, events have no meanings. We place meanings on events, right?
Right.
So once we found out the meaning that I placed on the events, the meaning that I placed on was something was wrong with me. I wasn't good enough. These bad things were happening to me because I was bad. And here's why I believe you, as a child, when you take on the burden of your parents arguing or your parents' divorce or your parents hitting you or your parents not showing up, and it's your problem, you can control it. Think about that. If it's not your fault and your parents are the way they are, that's a real scary thing because you have no control. So if you're bad and bad things are happening to you, if I can only be good, then maybe my dad will love me and stop hitting me, right?
Right.
So it gives you hope for a better tomorrow. But as a 47-year-old, those I'm not good don't ever serve you. They hardly ever serve you. I think the only thing it served me was it taught me how to make a lot of money to kind of prove my worth. But I made a lot of money, and I also gave back a lot of money because I made 5 business mistakes that cost my partner and I $9 million trying to chase my worth.
Right.
So I often think to myself, why is it that some people that have this severe trauma make a ton of money and then some people lose a lot? Again, like, I don't know if there's any rhyme or reason, but I have the same thought about professional athletes. Look at Tiger Woods. If anybody thinks Tiger Woods is happy and fulfilled and has been, there is zero chance of that. Look at the guy. He's almost killed himself a couple of times, right? Tom Brady, too, man. I'll get a lot of flack on this. Tom Brady. I don't know what Super Bowl it was. Maybe it was his last one. I think it was his last one. Within 2 minutes, that guy had a video that he had planned and spent money and time on. Probably not time because he has so much money. He probably hired someone. that within 2 minutes of that Super Bowl being done, it was like hitting his naysayers, like all the people who doubted him. Dude, the guy had won like, I don't know how many he's won, 6, 7, 8,
Six.
6. Okay. So he just won his 6th Super Bowl, but yet he had to step out and prove everyone he had to prove something. And look,
Right.
I think when you look at athletes and top CEOs, most of them have something to prove. That's why they work so hard.
It is. And that's the thing where I would disagree with you, that is the thing that serves them, right? We do a lot of the things that serves us. Like sometimes, going into depression and like locking ourselves in and staying away from people and drinking, like that, it serves that purpose. Now it isn't a long-term serving where it, because we're not defining good or bad. It's just, it is. So that's why people choose these other routes, is because it serves them at that point in their life. But I was listening to a podcast recently, and I don't know how much of science was behind it, but they talked about what are the things. Oh, it was oh man, the guy with the beard, the gym guy,
Hormozy.
Yeah, yeah, he was the one that said it. He said that when there was a study about when they were trying to identify the most common traits between millionaires and billionaires, one of them was that they didn't feel like they were good enough. And so this is the additional level of motivation that would have them just continually push through all of the naysayers and the ups and downs of business. And as soon as they accomplish these big things that they told themselves they want to accomplish, like the goals of, money and fortune and fame and the beautiful wife or husband and all the money, and then they wouldn't be happy, they wouldn't be satisfied, and they would set a new goal, and then they would accomplish it. So they're just on this perpetual line of trying to prove that they are worthy. I thought that was really interesting, and it fits right in line with what you're talking about.
So Benson, let me ask you something. So a second ago, you said you disagree because you think that thing serves them. Tell me how you think when you say it serves them. How do you define serving them?
Serving for me means it's solving a problem. So if they don't feel good enough and they can drink alcohol, then they don't have to think about that they're not good enough. And so that it fixes that problem for a temporary time period.
Yeah.
For temporary time period. Right.
Yeah.
And I've done some training through like, you've ever heard of PSI training? There's a handful of organizations where they train people to do certain things, and they talk about doing things that serve you at that point in time, but it isn't long-term solutions.
Yeah, because what I thought you were getting at, and I'm glad you clarified that, was it serves them because they have success, but it depends how you define success. They may have financial success, but there's a really good chance that their child is an addict, or their marriage is, their wife's cheating on them, or their health is bad. So I know a majority of the population, or that's maybe not fair, but a lot of people think when they look at someone like that, oh, they're successful. Well, what's successful? If successful is having $10 million in the bank, but having a wife and kids that love you, you get to define what success is. That's not success for me. I thought it was success for 47 years. Success to me now is serving people, doing something impactful and purposeful, that you wake up every day and you just love what you're doing and it's helping other people. That's my definition of success.
That's perfect. A lot of people can't define that. I've had trouble defining what success looks like for me, and it makes it problematic to set goals, right? Because I can't say like, oh, I need this much money or this thing, or in that people have tried to like help me like, well, what if you had that much money, how would it make you feel? Right. And so it's always like, what do those things really stand for? And so I do believe a lot of people are in that same position. And I've talked about it before too, like even when I'm doing training with our software, and, people come and go in this space, and, most people fail. And a lot of the gurus say, well, it's because you don't have a strong enough why. Right. So how does that why scenario fit into what you've learned the last 3 years?
Oh, wow. It's so freaking important. I didn't know my why for 47 years. I was like, why? I've got a company that flips, 253 houses 2 years ago, 223 last year, and I was making money. But I was like, was this why I was put here to buy houses, at a discount and resell them? I don't think so. But the thing is, I was in, and most people are in this day and age, like fight or flight for most of their life. We're supposed to be in fight or flight for like 5, 10, 20% of our life is like cavemen. And now it's like reversed. Um,
Hmm.
so when you spend a lot of time in fight or flight, and that means like you're pissed off a lot, or you're drinking a lot, or you're anxious a lot, or you're depressed a lot, um, you've got the proverbial lion chasing you, right? How in the world can you figure out your purpose and be creative and get your mind going if you're like running from the tiger, the lion? You can't. It's really, really hard. So within minutes or hours or weeks, whatever, of killing my tiger, the proverbial tiger, I found my why. And that is to give back this gift that I have been given. And now my why is so strong. I turned 50 last year, and I'm manifesting that I'm going to live to be 110. And I know that I'll do this the rest of my life. I don't know what it'll look like the rest of my life, but I know that I'll be helping people because I was given, not only was I given the gift, but I've been given the gift to actually help people because I'm pretty good at it. And I've got a lot to learn. I keep getting better, but I've got an insatiable appetite to just keep learning and learning because I just so want to help people and impact people get to this place of freedom that every single person deserves. And the only reason they don't have it, it's not because they don't have a lot of money. It's that one thing that I keep coming back to. It's thoughts. Change your thinking, change your life. And people think when I say that, it's just like, okay, well, let me go do some affirmations. I'm good. I'm beautiful. I'm strong. You can do that till the cows come home. But if you've got deeply buried subconscious beliefs, it's never going to work. That's why God bless Tony Robbins. I love him. But you go to one of his seminars and you come home and you're like, oh, rah, I'm going to be a different person. And then Tuesday rolls around, you look around, you're like, well, shit, I'm still drinking the wine and I'm still mad at my wife and I'm in a job I hate. Why? Because he didn't go deep enough to unearth the subconscious beliefs that are buried inside you.
Right. So you learn this through your own experiences, right? When you were younger, there was some unstable scenarios around your family. Your parents got divorced at a young age, and that caused some limiting beliefs and untruths in your life. Can you tell me about that time period in life and how you think it turned into, how you feel about yourself and the things you wanted to go and fix?
Sure. Yeah, my parents fought a lot. My dad loved to spend money because I think he felt that that made him feel better. And my mom liked to save money because that probably made her feel better. So they fought constantly about money. My dad would hit me with a belt on occasion. He would make fun of me. He was very, I had a big head growing up. And so I would be teased at school and then I'd come home and have to be teased by my father. I think a lot of times he, if I didn't know something, he would make fun of me. He would always put people down, I guess because it temporarily made him feel better. And so yeah, I internalized it all. And when my parents got divorced, I was actually happy, but then my dad stopped paying for us and my mom was working 2 jobs and could barely keep up. And one day she was like, we may have to move into public housing. In public housing, I'd been there because she had been a nurse, and so she took me there. And look, this was Charlottesville, Virginia. It wasn't the Bronx. It wasn't South Central LA. But it didn't matter because I didn't know anything different. All I know is it was a public housing and I heard people got shot there. So I think my
Mm.
10-year-old brain said, when you don't have money, you run the risk of moving somewhere, losing your house, and getting shot. So
Mm.
I think that till this day, still have issues around money. I've improved them drastically in my transformation over the last 3 years, but I still have issues around money. I want to make a bunch of money because that's security and that's how my dad showed his love. I also felt not enough because of the way that my dad treated me. These bad things in my family must be happening because I'm bad. And that's what I lived with for 47 years. It cost me 2 marriages that didn't work out, kids with behavioral problems. I said I had a good relationship with my son, but it's way, way better now. It's way, way better with my daughter. I told you about the 5 business mistakes that cost me $9 million. And then I used to use weed and alcohol all the time. I don't do that anymore because I was thinking about this. I was going to do a video on this. I just haven't gotten around to doing it. I used to love, love, love smoking weed because I was like, I love the way it makes me feel.
Mm.
Now when I smoke it, it's been a while. And every time I do it, I'm like, God, I don't like this. And here's why I don't like it. I don't like the way it makes me feel. But you know why? Because before I didn't like myself without it. And it got me into a
Mm.
state that I liked. Now I love myself and it brings me down. And that's the same, I think,
Mm.
for everyone. If everyone did the work, because I used to be the guy that was preaching, oh, it's from the earth, it's healthy, there's nothing wrong with it. And now I've done a lot of study. If you smoke, you should go listen to Andrew Huberman's podcast. It's been seen millions of times on the effect of THC on your brain and body. Benson, it's staggering. So now I don't need to smoke. I don't want to be in an altered state because I love my freaking state that I'm in so much and I want to have my clarity.
Very interesting. Yeah, people go to THC because they feel like it has a lot less negative side effects, right? No calories, and it's supposed to be less addictive or non-addictive, and there's benefits to sleeping and some other things that people have, pain, right? It's medicinal, right? I mean, literally, they put the tag on it that it's medicinal.
To a point. The whole
Right.
sleeping thing, for years, I would smoke like a hit or two before I went to sleep. And my reason was it helped me sleep. And now I know better. You cannot get into REM sleep, which is so important for the restoration of your mind and body. If you have alcohol and weed, or either of those in your system, you really can't get into REM sleep. That's why if you chronically smoke marijuana and you stop and you have these crazy dreams, it's because your body is finally getting into a REM state where you can actually have the dreams.
Mm.
So yeah, Dr. Amen, who's a psychiatrist, I think, has like 1,000 clinics around the country. So I think he had 60,000 brain scans when he did this study. He looked at what aged the brain the worst. Number one was psychosis, specifically schizophrenia. Number two on the list, marijuana. Alcohol, way down on the list. Yeah.
So remind me of the list, the causes of something.
What ages your brain more than anything?
Ages
Yeah, a
your brain.
list of stuff that ages your brain: schizophrenia, marijuana, and then way down on the list, or what's much further down on the list, was alcohol. Yeah.
Wow.
He says it this is him. I'm sure there's going to be 1,000 people that say he's full of shit, but he's a pretty smart guy and he's got the brain scans. He says to back it up. He says that it does something to the oxygen in your brain. So,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, I've been hearing that oxygen thing for a while now. You've probably heard of Gary Brecka, and how he's talking a lot about how oxygen is one of the core things to those, like, body regulation, brain function, a lot of other things that hold us back is because we're literally suffocating ourselves.
Mm. Yeah, we don't breathe. I know most of us breathe from up here. We should be breathing in our belly. I just bought this. I'm going to have him on my podcast. I'm blank on his name, but he got in a boating accident when he was like 20. He was in the Army or one of the services, and he became a quadriplegic. And it just Army. It just happened to be that his PT guy, his physical therapist in the Army, was a yogi. So he started teaching him breathing techniques. He's now
Wow.
walking. He's fine. He just like Joe, and he's a disciple of Joe Dispenza. Joe Dispenza's his mentor. And if you don't know Joe Dispenza's story, he got hit on a bike and like fractured, and the doctors were like, "You're screwed. You're never going to walk." And Joe was like, "No, screw you." And for 6 months, he laid in a bed and he imagined his vertebrae growing together and his spine, everything fixing, and now it's fixed. So breathing is one of the
It's
things that
amazing.
I'm trying to get better at in my life. So I just bought this guy's program and I did some breathing. You get into, might mess this up, so sorry if I do, but with the heavy breathing, you get into a like controlled a hyperventilation, and it gets the CO2 out of your body. It puts oxygen in it, and then it gets you in an alkaline state. He claims that all this alkaline water people drink, there's no way to get there with drinking it. You've got to do it through breathing. So breathing is one of the things in the next few months and years that I'm going to really focus on, because it's so important.
Oh yeah, I could see that fitting in perfectly with what you do through your coaching program.
Yeah.
And then, were you there when Jamil did his breathing exercise?
I
Were you
was there, and I want to share the experience.
okay?
First of all, I asked him for the recording, and he says it was too big. It was an exercise where I just eaten an acai bowl, which I absolutely love. I mean, who shows up to mastermind? And the guy's so first class. He's got like 50 acai bowls, like my favorite. I'm like, oh my gosh. So we lay on the ground, and he does this So in and out, in and out. And I think he did it for like 15 or 20 minutes. And he's like, come on, you can do it. You could do it. You could do it. This is no lie. I start convulsing on the floor. I'm like, oh my God, I must just be it must be so cold in here. And it must have something to do with the acai bowl. After listening to the recording of this guy who I said was a paraplegic, he says your body temperature lowers like massively when you get into that state. So yeah, it was
Wow.
one of the cooler experiences I've had. And I want to figure out what the heck that recording was so I can recreate it. Were you
I
there?
wasn't there for that day. I was there the
Okay.
first day where we did a 10 or 12 minute breathing exercise. And I've had trouble meditating my whole life. I've tried it multiple times. I could never get to a state where I felt like something was happening, right? And I always felt like I was either falling asleep or I was just super aware of like what was going on around me. And I wasn't ever able to get there. But that was the very first time through that breathing exercise that I started to feel like I was separating my subconscious from my body. And it was all from that breathing exercise. It was supposed to be like a teaser, and I wasn't there the last day. Now I'm really regretting it.
It was phenomenal. It was absolutely phenomenal.
That is so cool. So the oxygen piece of it is an important part, obviously, for the brain, and um, falling into REM sleep. Those are some things you plan on incorporating into your coaching.
So I do a little bit. I mean,
Hmm.
I've got a PDF that I share with people who have sleeping issues. I cannot
Hmm.
tell you, Benson, how many people have come to me. And once I give them the recording and say, listen to this at night, their sleeping problems go away. One of my mentors, Marissa Peer, she was a 2005 #1 therapist in all of UK. She says sleep is an issue of the mind. So if you have a racing mind, if you have sleep issues, it is all around exactly what I'm talking about. So we haven't really got into the self-love thing, but when you come up with these coping mechanisms, these untrue meanings, right? And you don't feel enough, that's lack of self-love. The opposite of self-love is self-contempt. Self-contempt is, unfortunately, a lot of people's lives. Self-contempt leads to, this is another famous person, Mark Mincola. He says, self-contempt leads to dis-ease. So your body is in ease, and dis-ease leads to disease. So if you're
Mm.
listening to this podcast and you're like, this stuff sounds a little too woo-woo to me, and the whole self-love concept, like, whatever, I love myself. I said the same thing. So if you want to figure out if you have these issues, so if you can't sleep or you're overworking or your relationships suck or you're overweight or you're depressed or anxious, go take my 3-minute self-love quiz. It's 12 questions at bradchandler.com/quiz. And if you score lack of self-love or mild self-love or lack of self-love, it is an indication that you have these subconscious beliefs that are controlling you. So don't look at that score and be like, oh no, this sucks. Look at it just the opposite. Look at it that, oh my gosh, can my life change so profoundly? Because if you have lack of self-love or mild self-love, I promise you, every single area of your life is affected negatively to some degree.
Hmm. So most people go floating around in this world and their own lives, never knowing that anything like this even exists. And they just get caught up in all the distractions, right? The Super Bowl's coming up, and they work themselves to the bone, and there's just like all these distractions, the news, the media. Like, how is the average person supposed to figure this out? I mean, they're going to stumble upon this podcast, or what does the average person do?
What a great question, man. We were watching, my girlfriend was over here, and my son was here, or he lives here with me. He's 21. And we were watching one of the playoff games. And the stadium, it was the San Francisco stadium. I don't know what it cost to build, $1 billion or $2 billion. And she just was like, isn't that interesting how there's so much money going into this? And yet we have so many people who are starving, and the world's kind of falling apart in some areas. And, a lot of people are talking about World War III. And she's like, it's a distraction. And my son, who's really smart, was like, yeah, they built the Colosseums in Rome as Rome was collapsing so they could like distract people. Look, I mean, this is a whole nother conversation for another day. Like, it's because it's so deep.
Right.
Your question was, how do you get out of this? And look, if I would have been listening to this podcast 5 years ago, I'd have been like, what are they talking about? This is craziness. I'm fine. So what if I smoke some weed? So what if I had 2 divorces? Something's wrong with I just am bad at picking wives. So what if I've lost millions of dollars? It was only, I stumbled upon it, honestly. Like when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. I would just say that it is the book behind me, The Myth of Normal, is that there's a myth of what you think is normal. The whole book, the 500-page book by Dr. Gabor Mate, is about how unprocessed childhood trauma affects your health and how it destroys it. So many people, Benson, have just normalized this. I'm in a shitty marriage. So what? I'm overweight. So what? I'm so pissed off when someone going to the work every day. It's not normal. You're not supposed to be in a triggered state. You're not supposed to be getting divorced at the rate of 50 to 70%, 70 something, 72% divorce rate for the third marriage. That's not normal. 70% of Americans on a prescription drug and 60% on 2 drugs. 33% of Americans on an antidepressant or an anti-depressant drug. Dude, that is not normal. So just get educated. I hope you stumble across this podcast, but when you want a better way, there's a better way. It doesn't matter if the world's crumbling around. I'm not paying attention, and I'm living in this just my little bubble, having a great old time, being happy and trying not to be triggered, which I hardly ever do anymore.
That's amazing. It's funny. You kept saying it's not normal, but when you look at like the definition of normal, it means that like a lot of people do it, right? Like a lot of people are doing it, or most people do it. Normal, is like average, right? The average person, that half the population would have to be doing it. And half the population are doing these things that are self-destructive and that aren't helping them in their lives and being happy. And I've found myself thinking like, well, yeah, I'm doing all these things, but I'm better than that guy, right? Like, so I'm comparing myself to people who are worse off, right? Do you see a lot of people falling into that trap where they're like, yeah, it's not so bad. I've got all these problems, but at least I'm not that.
I mean, it was me for 47 years, but it went
Right.
both ways. I would look at the person who was, I quote, thought was lower than me, and I'd be like, well, I'm better than them, make me feel better. But then I'd go to a room like CG and I'd look at people that were bigger, better. Again, this is all around money now. Now I know
Right.
better, but it was all around money. If you made more money, you were better than I was. So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, so many people, comparison is the thief of joy, right? Yeah, comparison. Just compare yourself to how you did yesterday. Did you get a little better than yesterday? If so, give yourself a big hug or pat on the back.
Right. So we just need to be more introspective, look at ourselves, think about what we really want, what really will make us happy. And I think really kind of thinking about like what our why is in life, because we operate in the world of entrepreneurs who are really driven by money and success and fame, but it isn't normal to do that. Like, the average person is not seeking that, and they're just looking to live their normal lives, the 9 to 5, and having a house and a husband or wife, family, kids. For them, for the average person, I can see it would be much more difficult to like really strive for improving ourselves in a way that is not normal for most. And they just get caught up in those ruts where they just dig it deeper and deeper and deeper. And it's no surprise to me that suicide rates are high, and there's all of these unhappy people in the world and doing acting it out.
Yeah, I don't think it has anything to do with entrepreneurism or your income level. It's everywhere. It's pervasive. It's
Yeah.
absolutely pervasive. You can go to the country club, you can go to a trailer park, you're going to find dysfunction, dysfunction, dysfunction. I mean, I'm a member of a marina, and I mean, police are showing up because some guy's, bashing his wife's head into the bottom of a boat. He owns a $500 million boat. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, it's just, it all comes back
Wow.
to what happened to you as a child and what were those meanings that you placed around those events that happened to you.
So this podcast is mostly around real estate investing and business, right? And we've been talking about nothing, very little having to do with that. But what I think we've uncovered is that, even if you achieve these different levels of success, you're not necessarily going to be happy. And for those people that are listening to this who haven't found that why, and they're still striving to reach different levels of success, there's using some tools. Like, number one, you talked about this questionnaire. And also, if you guys go to bradchandler.com, there's more information there that you can look into this and listen back, and maybe even look at some of the resources that Brad's talked about. There's a different way to measure success, and really get honest with yourself. And I'm down this path too with ourselves on what it means to be happy, and how can we measure it, and what can we do in our lives to help us get there. And not, money's great. Money makes a lot of things easier, but if you're completely unhappy and you're self-medicating and everything around you is falling apart, then that money doesn't really mean much of anything. Brad, for people that want to learn more about what you're working on, and how you can potentially help them, like, how do they find you?
Yeah, so I have an amazing podcast. I just found out, kind of happenstance, a couple weeks ago, that we're in the top 3% of all podcasts now in the world. So,
Congratulations.
yeah, thank you, thank you. So check out How to Be Happier for Entrepreneurs podcast, and then you mentioned my site, bradchandler.com. Go take the quiz. Like, you owe it to yourself, you owe it to your family, you owe it to your kids. If you have got a bad marriage, it has nothing to do with the actual relationship. It has to do with the relationship that each of you has with yourself. And when you can understand that, everything will change. And if your kids have behavioral problems, anxiety, depression, you're likely the cause of it. Notice I didn't say it's your fault, because it's not your fault. Whatever you're struggling with, it's not your fault. It's all from these buried thoughts in your subconscious mind. So, yeah, if you want to find a life of freedom that you can only find through self-love and self-compassion, that's the only way you can be truly free, is to be able to be your authentic self. And you can't be your authentic self if you can't accept yourself and love yourself. You can take the first step by taking the quiz and checking out my program. It's changing. Go look at the reviews on my site. We've had quite some amazing stories, and they're just going to keep rolling too.
Absolutely. Like I said, I recognized a lot of people on there, and there are some very successful people that are going down the same path that we all are. And so, there's no reason to recreate the wheel. There's a proven process. There's science behind this. But do your own research, obviously. Like, be a consumer of that education, and go do your own research and learn about yourself, and learn about some of the methods that Brad teaches as well. Brad, thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking time and sharing your story. And you have no problem being vulnerable. Like, that's like a skill in itself that I think a lot more of us can learn. But thank you so much.
But Benson, let me say something on that. That wasn't always the case.
Mm,
3 years ago, if I would have come on here and said, like, I couldn't have done it. I couldn't have said, like, my dad made fun of me because I had a big head. I've said in videos that I asked my second wife, like, can you tell me I'm sexy or handsome more? It didn't matter how much she told me, because I didn't feel enough. So I just wanted her to say it more and more. Those things, I would have paid like 10 grand to not say those things 3 years ago. Why can I say those things now? Because I'm free. I am my authentic self. If you want to judge me for those things, I now know that it's about you. I don't care if you judge me anymore. But
mm.
5 years ago, I'd say, I don't care if you judge me, but I really did. That's why I would get nervous, and I'd have to drink or smoke weed, or, to feel comfortable in social situations. Now I can do whatever. I'm free. You get to have the same opportunity to be free, because yourself, your essence, is an amazing human being. The fact that you're on this earth is a complete miracle. Think about how you got here and everything that had to happen. You were not a mistake. It was no accident. You were put here for a massive mission, but it's really hard to find that massive mission when you've got the buried thoughts that I had for 47 years. Clear those thoughts, change those, replace them with the truth, and oh my Lord, will life change in a way that you probably can't even imagine.
No better way to end it than that, Brad. Very well said. Thanks again for being here. I really appreciate it. You guys go check out Brad's podcast. And like and follow this podcast, and subscribe so you can get more tips and tricks about real estate investing and business, and self-love. Brad, we're starting a new trend here. We're going to be taking segments, I think, of people and looking for different ways of improving ourselves, and so we can achieve all the massive success that we want in life. Be addicted to self-love. Brad's got the shirt right there. Thanks so much.
Benson. Thank you.
That's a wrap on today's Real Estate Revelations. Thank you for tuning into the REI Hacker Podcast. Remember, every property has a story, and every deal is a lesson. Until next time, keep hacking the real estate world.